Hey, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. This is Chad from Ascension Worship. It's been a few weeks, and this week I wanted to show you guys something that I've seen a lot of talk about online recently. We are going to talk about setting up a DAW Broadcast Rig. So, if you're like us, your church has probably gone through a lot of transitions over the past few months. Coming to you from Jacksonville, Florida, the way it's been here, COVID-19 hit, and we went from doing live services, and only certain churches in town were really doing broadcast or doing it well anyway, to now all the churches were scrambling and doing post-production mixes, which I was heavily involved with, which was nice. And now, being in Florida, we have lifted a lot of the lockdown stuff with the churches, and now we're back doing live services, but to a limited degree. Not everybody can be involved in those, unfortunately. So now the churches are having to do the things they're doing in post-production, but to do them live for the people at home while doing church like we used to various degrees for the people in the room, which makes things way more difficult because some of the ways you could cheat, if you want to call it that, when we were doing post-production, we are now having to do live, which is a lot harder. With that said, one thing that a lot of people are doing now, and you've probably been bombarded with ads from different groups that do this online, is you're now seeing there's a lot of what are called DAW templates. And a DAW is a digital audio workstation. It's basically a recording program like Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton that is being misused to a degree to be a live mixer, because it gives you some more options than most live mixers would do. And if you maybe can't afford space-wise or equipment-wise to have a mixer, you can use a computer and kind of make your own mixer out of it, which is pretty cool. So I've seen a lot of questions online about how this works and the pros and cons. So today I'm going to go over some of the pros and cons for you, and give you a demonstration of a setup that we've done recently at my home church, Rice Church in Jacksonville, Florida. Now this video is not meant to be a sales pitch, but I do have a small sales pitch. Let me get out of the way really quick. This video is going to show you tools you can do this on your own. So I'm not trying to sell you anything, but if you do need help getting this set up and getting a strong start, please feel free to email us. In the case of Rise, during the initial stages of the lockdown, we were doing post-production mixes for the church with the idea that we would transpose that or transition that into a live DAW rig later on. So we were very specific in the plugins that we used and the way that we set things up so that we could try and make it as efficient as possible for a church to use later on down the road. So there's a lot of templates out there for sale. They range from as cheap as $30 to as much as $500 or more. If you're interested, give me an email and I'll talk to you about what we can do for you. But we don't want to just sell you a template. We want to set you up a custom template designed for your church, where we get your drum tones to be the best they can be without having to resort to a replacement, and get things just dialed in as much as possible for your actual team, to make it less work for you. So pitch out of the way. Again, everything in this video you can do on your own, with your own skill set. I'm just going to kind of give you some tips along the way there. So real quick, just so you can kind of know what we're working with here. Sorry, I can't get my screen turned around. Here's the rig that I'm going to be showing you. I'm going to be doing a screen capture of this screen over here. Now they've got two screens in their rig. So normally I would have these two mixer windows spread out. But for the sake of the video, we're going to just see it all in one screen here, which is another valid way you can do that. We, again, not absolutely necessary, but in this case, we have two Behringer X-Touch extenders. These are excellent for giving you some hands-on control. Originally, we had one extender and then one X-Touch Mini as a means of getting around a little bit faster. But we found that it was worth the extra funds to go ahead and get 2 of these so that, like a digital mixer, you have a digital display of what you're seeing on the mixer at that time. Let's also look at, we are using some Yamaha 8-inch studio monitors, and I'm a bass player, so I have to have a sub. So we have a KRK sub down there. We are using a Focusrite. I forget which model this is. I think it's the 18i8 as our audio interface. And the main reason for that is to get outputs to our studio monitors, and we can hook up headphones if there's something going on where we maybe don't want to do studio monitors. So that's connecting what we're listening to, and then we're connected downstairs. There's a Allen Heath SQ7 with a Dante card in it, and I'm grateful that we insisted that we add a Dante card when we installed that board, because that's what's allowing us to get up to 64 channels of audio back and forth between the console and our rig here. Okay, so enough of that. As you can see on the screen, I've got a little list here of some pros and cons, so I'll talk through these real quick, and then I'll show you some things in Logic. Pros, you are probably going to need a computer anyway. And what I mean by that is that there are very few digital mixers that I experience in churches that actually have a brick wall limiter built into them. And to me, a brick wall limiter is a necessity for getting a decent mix out online, just for the pure sake of volume, not trying to go into any of the specifics on how loud your mix should be. For me, it's a very practical thing. I want to be able to hear the band and the pastor fairly clearly at about 3/4 volume on a smartphone. So if I can turn my iPhone up to 3/4 volume in a normal room and hear it okay, great. And then that gives me 4 clicks up that I can go if I'm, in my car and there's road noise or something happening. So that's my general goal, and a brick wall limiter is one of the ways to help make that happen. And with the exception of some of the Behringer equipment out there, most digital mixers have really nice compressors, but they don't have a brick wall limiter that can handle audio the way that a normal brick wall limiter can do. So even if you are using another console, like if we were to put another SQ7 up here, that would be good. But we would probably, to get a good mix online, still need to hook up a Waves server or a computer to be able to get that final output that we want anyway. So in this case, might as well go ahead and just beef up that computer and use that. And then if we decide to go with a console up here later on, well, cool, we'll just use that same computer. So it's not a huge loss. Okay, next, allows for various plugins from different manufacturers. Again, most live rigs that are going to use like a Waves server, the Waves servers will only let you use Waves plugins. Whereas here, by using Logic, if I go to, say, for example, the bass guitar, down here you can see not only am I using Waves plugins for a lot of the processing, but I'm actually using a SansAmp emulator that is a free plugin that this company put out. The BOD is from TSC Audio. This is a great sounding SansAmp emulator plugin, and it's free, but I wouldn't be able to use it without a DAW, because it wouldn't work in a normal Waves rig, unfortunately. So you can mix and match your different plugins. Most of what we're using here is Waves, but we've got a few free plugins that we've added as well. And of course, Logic comes with a ton of great plugins if you want to go into that. So that's really helpful with a DAW rig. Next is, this is a big one, auto-tune, drum manipulation, surgical editing. I'll even throw in there like classic compressors. Certain plugins have some of these elements built into them to different degrees, but with a DAW rig, you can add in, so in our case, we're using Waves real-time auto-tune, drum manipulation. Some people like to replace drums. I like to go in and use some specific gates and compressors to try and get the drums to sound like they're being replaced, but still be the original drum. And you can do that a lot easier in this rig than you can on a console. And surgical editing, so I like to use a plugin like the Waves S6 is a great EQ for really sculpting your tone, but also doing some specific dynamic EQ, those kinds of things as necessary. Next, record ready. So, being that this is a recording program that we're using for a live purpose, it is made to be a recording program. So here's at Rise, their past Sunday, they recorded. Let's see, they do both services. They recorded the second service, it looks like. And so if, let's say that, we're using an original song one week, and we want to put that together for an album, or, do whatever we want with these recordings. Well, they're already here. They're loaded into a recording program with the names, with some plugin settings ready to go. We could send this off to a recording engineer, a mix engineer, and they could, keep going with the mix, and it's going to be hopefully close already. Or you could go and overdub parts, whatever you want to do. It's a recording program. It's all ready to go. We can use this Focusrite interface up here and start working on our other stuff as we see fit. So that's fantastic. And not the same for a, a live mixer, unfortunately. Cons, and a lot of these are related to some of the pros. One, so when you buy a like an Allen Heath SQ7, the board is made by Allen Heath. The faders are made by Allen Heath. The screen's made by Allen Heath. The DSP is by Allen Heath. The plugins are by Allen Heath. So it's like never going to crash on you, or if it does, it's very rare. Whereas a DAW rig, let's say that you have a computer made by Apple, but if you're using Pro Tools, the software is made by Avid, and then inside of that software is plugins made by Waves, and then other companies, and so on and so forth. You are going to be more prone to crashing because of all that stuff trying to work together. So that's part of the reason why I like to use Logic, is because it's made by Apple, and we're using a Mac Mini in this case as our DAW rig. It's less prone to crashing. Now, we had early on, this is a Waves issue, Studio Rack, which we'll talk about in a moment here, as a plugin host. If you closed the window a certain way, it would cause Logic to crash. And so we just stopped closing it that way until like a week later an update came out, and then we were all good to go. So, so if you are careful and you keep up, make sure that you're doing the right updates at the right times, it probably won't be an issue for you, but it is more of an issue than on a mixer. Different platform. What I mean by that is, let's say that you have an X32 at front of house and an X32 at your broadcast position. Well, in that situation, great. You're really only having to train someone on one platform. Okay, you know how to mix on X32, great. It's a little different for broadcast, but it's still, that gain knob is in the same place no matter what console you're on. The compressor knob's on the same place no matter what console you're on. Whereas here, you're likely using a Behringer or Allen Heath or whatever product downstairs, and now you're using a Apple product upstairs. It's just not the same. So now you're having to train people in two locations, and it's just a little bit harder. Next, again, made for recording, not necessarily live sound. So again, this is something that is a pro in one sense and a con in another. Simple things like turning on your channels, downstairs on the SQ7, you just unmute it and you can hear the sound. Whereas here you have to actually tell it to record, even if you're not recording, to get audio to come through. Not a big deal, but it is just not as intuitive for people who don't come from a studio background. So you have to teach them that kind of thing. And finally, slower workflow. So what I mean by that is, consoles are made to be fast. No matter what channel I'm on, that gain plugin is going to be the gain plugin for that channel. No matter what EQ I have, generally that, gain for the low mid. It's always going to be the gain for the low mid. Whereas in Logic or any other DAW, you might have to do more mouse clicks and then use a mouse. You can get something like a MIDI controller and set that up if you plan through that, but it's still just not quite as easy as you can set it up on a console. Also on a console, you can put your faders wherever you want. You could have an entire bank where it's just the kick drum, and that would be doable. In a program like a DAW, it's not as easy to do those kinds of things. It is doable in some degrees, but you have to think that it's really made to be a recording program and not a live sound mixer. So it's not quite as efficient to get around in. Okay, so let's talk about why I specifically choose Logic for our DAW system. And a lot of it has to do with those last few things I said that were cons. When it comes to slower workflow and just trying to get around, Logic is really, really great because it has two things that organizationally make it very, very quick. One is that this thing called track stacks. So you can see on here, I've got several different buses. These are track stacks that have a little triangle next to them. And this is a track stack, meaning that even though I have probably about 10 lanes of audio, maybe more, of drum channels, I am seeing them as one single strip on here. Now in this view, if I wanted to see those channels, I can click on the little arrow and it will show me, it'll spill out all the different channels that comprise that drum group. So track stacks are great because they are basically a combination of folders, meaning that they can hold multiple files within them, physically, like the way you see them on screen. Buses, because within this track stack, I can actually have processing on the audio that's going through that track stack. And they act like a DCA, meaning that, for example, my drums happen to have two different reverbs inside the track stack. But if I wanted to send the snare drum to the generic band reverb that I have in another bus, I can do that. And because it's a post-fade send, if I turn down this fader for the drums, it will turn down the feed going to that band reverb as well because it acts like a DCA. So really, really organizationally excellent the way it works on here. So one, you get track stacks, which is helpful. Two, you've got different modes. So right now we're in tracks mode up here. And so I can see basically whatever is in my arrange window. So I can go to the arrange window and reorganize these things as I need to. So I've got a bunch of track stacks happening in here. If we were to expand all this audio out, we would have about 73 lanes of audio, let's call them. So right now I can, with my mouse, it's just barely over a screen long to see all the different groups that I have going. But if I were to expand all those in a regular, like let's say Pro Tools or Reaper or something like that, if I wanted to get from this computer feed here all the way to, let's say, the keyboard, I would have to go several pages over and find, okay, cool, here's the keyboard. And so it's not fast when you're in a rush to get from one thing to another. So when I have it all condensed down, we can see, okay, here's the playbacks bus, which encompasses that computer feed. And then right over here, not even a full screen over, is the keys group that I can control right there. So that's in tracks view. Now down here, you notice I have a second window. So Logic will allow you to open up more than one mixer window at a time, and they're linked together. And this one's in single view. So now that I have keys selected, I can see I have my keys bus at the top here, and then I've got my keys channels. They're going into a keys bus that's specific to keys 1. So if I had multiple keys in there. Like I have a synth bus that's going to, or two synth channels are going to a synth bus, and all that's going to band reverb. It's just showing me everything all the way out to the end. Let's look at our drums here. That's a good example. So we got drums, my overheads with an overhead bus, kick, snares, tom 1 and 2, a snare reverb, a drum reverb, and then all the way out to the end. So all that stuff feeds into the drum bus. The drum bus feeds into the band bus. The band bus goes to the mastering bus, which then the mastering bus feeds to our output. So we've got the stream output, which is going to our stream online. That's the final product. We've got the monitor output, which is what we're hearing in here. So I can do things like sum that to mono, and it will only affect what we hear while we're checking our mix. And then I even have a solo output where on top of every single one of these channels, because this is made for recording, not for live sound. So instead of hitting the solo bus, the destructive solo bus on, say, Tom 2, which the online audience would also only hear Tom 2 if I did that. Instead, I can turn on the solo bus for Tom 2, and then I would now be able to hear that out the solo bus, which is going to my headphone jack, so I can listen to it in our broadcast location. So you can see there's a lot of options for things that you can do. But the big thing I want to get at with this with Logic is that I'm doing basically what in the mixer world you would call spills, DCA spill, or pop groups, where if I want to go from mixing the drums to like, okay, well now I need to adjust the vocal levels. I can just click on vocals, and now I'm in those, and I can start adjusting those as necessary. So in this window, for the sake of me showing this on YouTube, I'm doing it all on one screen. So I have my tracks view up top and my single view down below. In the real world at Rise, because we are a permanent location, I have it set to where on one screen we have tracks, and on the other screen we have single view. And it just makes it a little bit easier because we also have those tied to the different motorized fader banks, so that just visually it's easy to see what you're doing and you can get around really quickly with it. So Logic is great for that. Again, Logic's just really stable. The routing options are fantastic. Very, very good choice for that. Let's talk about Waves. Logic comes with a ton of excellent free plugins, but I like using the Wave stuff. One, if you aren't just using Logic, I could use these same plugins in Pro Tools or whatever we have. So that's kind of nice. If you do want to use some of these things in your live rig, you could potentially do that as well, and again have the same plugins going. So that's why I've gone with Waves for these options. First off, we are using a plugin host called Studio Rack. So for example, let's go back to our drums. So Studio Rack here, I'm not using them all, but I have 8 plugins loaded for my drum bus that I'm using. And if I were to load those 8 plugins into Logic's channel strip, then my mixer window would become taller and taller. And especially in a single screen scenario, which a lot of like mobile churches have to do, it makes it really hard to be able to visually see everything that's going on. Another real big benefit to using this plugin host is in Logic, if I were to bypass a plugin like this entire drum group, it bypasses the audio effect of the plugin, but it does not affect the processing, meaning that it's still processing the same amount of latency that these plugins are causing, because that's just the way Logic handles it. But if I wanted to turn things on and off and actually affect the processing, but still be able to turn them back on as needed, I can do that in Waves. You can see up here the C1 compressor gate is in italics because I decided that I just straight up didn't need it. And rather than it causing more processing on my computer, I disabled it. So I can simply right click on it and enable plugin. So like this plugin, for example, if I right click on it, I can scroll down and see this causes 7.1 milliseconds of latency because of the way it has a look ahead function and all that kind of stuff in there. So if I were to just bypass it, well, cool, I can just turn them on and off and hear the difference. You know, if I was to use it live, I could do that. But in my case, I may want it there in case I decide I want to use it later on. You know, as I'm putting my mix together during rehearsal, not during the service. But I can disable it, and now it is no longer causing that latency. It just shows the overall rack latency. So that's especially useful for your mastering plugins if you're trying to A/B some different things and you don't want to have a ton of extra processing being thrown on your computer. Being able to do that within Studio Rack is amazing. Studio Rack is also awesome because it makes it really quick to find the plugins that you want. So if I want to replace this with a different Dynamics CQ or Dynamics processor, I can go in here and I can type in the name. So like I can type in 76 and then there's my 1176 really quickly. It can also allow you to do some really intense processing. So if I wanted to do some parallel compression or multi-band compression out of compressors that aren't made to be multi-band compressors, the new Studio Rack will let you do that. I might go over some of those things in a later video. But it's incredible some of the things that it can do. And it will show you your gain reduction for all the plugins now, which is a new thing in this version of Studio Rack. So Studio Rack is awesome. I highly recommend it. Now, as far as your actual Waves plugins, most like what we're looking at right now, everything on this page, with the exception of the F6 and the DBX 160, all come built into the Waves Horizon bundle. So the Horizon bundle used to retail for $4,000. It's probably been years since they've ever actually gotten someone to pay that much for the Horizon bundle. For the past several months, and this is August 2020, so this could change at any moment, so I suggest you hop onto it. $350 is the Horizon bundle, and that comes with 80 plugins with just a ton of great utility plugins, EQs, compressors, but then they also have a lot of vintage compressors, so all the CLA 1176, the 2A, the 3A, all that stuff is built into this bundle. A lot of vintage EQs, almost everything you would need is built into there right away. The only plugins that I've had, the churches I've been working with add, have been the real-time tuning, the F6, which is, let me turn this one on here so you can see it, just an amazing EQ that is not only an EQ, but it's a dynamic EQ. So I could take this and let's say I wanted to, sometimes the toms are too bitey at 1K, I don't know. I could say, okay, well, I can dip it down a little bit, but really when it hits a certain level, it's going to push down further and it's going to compress that EQ range. So just really, really cool the things you can do with the F6. The DBX 160, which is a great compressor for getting punchy drums, if you set it correctly anyway. I love that a lot. And then as an optional thing, if your drums don't sound great, and again you want to avoid doing replacement, Torque is a great plugin. We don't have it on this rig, but Horizon bundle's $350. Last I checked, the tuning is either 30 or 50. F6 is 30 or 50. DBX is 30 or 50, and Torque is 30 or 50. They're all like $30 or $50. So worst case scenario, Logic is $200. The Horizon bundle, so $550, $6, $7. So at most it'd be $750 to get Logic and then all these Waves plugins, and you'd be ready to go, which is amazing. Computer. So we are using a 2018 model Mac Mini. It is like the stock version that you see on the Apple website, but with added RAM. So the reason why we went with the Mac Mini is because it has the ability to, as a user, you can upgrade the RAM. So it comes with 8 gigs. So it's $1,100. It comes with 8 gigs of RAM, 6-core processor, and a SSD hard drive. At first, we were going with the iMac, but I didn't realize that the stock iMac for the same price, $1,100, doesn't come with an SSD, and you can only upgrade to 16 gigs of RAM, and you need to have an authorized person do that for you. So Mac Mini is definitely the way to go. You just have to buy the screens and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have to be a nice screen because you're just doing audio. We got the Mac Mini, 32 gigs of RAM. It's about $250 to buy the RAM and do it yourself. It's pretty expensive to have Apple do it for you, but you can do it in under an hour with a kit that you can buy online. And it's been awesome. I hope that helps you guys to understand what you can do with a DAW rig. Sorry there's no audio examples in this particular video. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the YouTube comment section, and I'll address those as I can and maybe make some follow-up videos. I'm also going to do some videos hopefully next week on a hybrid rig, so using like a Behringer Wing with a iMac running Waves plugins, a lot of the same plugins, and how you can set that up as well. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Again, this is not meant to be a sales pitch, but if you do need help, you can reach out to me at techtuesday@ascensionworship.com, and we can talk about what it would cost to get a customized template that I'd put together for you. But otherwise, you can do this yourself, and it's a great rig to go with. It's been really, really fun to play with. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Until next time, have a great week.